All right. Well, I guess we'll just start. We'll get going. And like I had mentioned earlier, um, this is being recorded and will be posted to the Olympia Indivisible website and to our YouTube channel. And can you remind me, Sharon, what the housekeeping details are? I don't have that in front of me.
It's pretty much what you were saying, John. It's just to let people know they are being recorded,
Okay.
and
All right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And any questions that you want to pose to our candidates, uh, you can be put in the chat, um, and we will get to them if we have time. Okay. So our first candidate tonight is Jasmine Vasavada. Am I pronouncing that correct?
It's I go by Jasmine Vasavada.
Vasavada.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks for correcting me on that. And she is running for Port Commissioner in District 1. And so I'd like to give Jasmine an opportunity to tell us a little bit about why she is running for Port Commissioner um, and give us a little bit about her background. So go ahead, Jasmine, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, John, and the others who are gathering here on Saturday night. Thanks for this opportunity to address you and potentially up to 600 members of Olympia Indivisible and others who go to your YouTube channel. This is my first election, my first run for office. I have been working in the world of politics and policy for some time. And for me, I think I've decided to run for the Port of Olympia because it's the only public entity in Thurston County that's devoted to economic development. And I want to see the kind of economic development that will create the community where my kids can live and grow and settle and extend for generations. I don't want to have the kind of town where people have to move away as they grow older. I had a journey to get here to Olympia. I am not born and raised here in Thurston County. I'm born in New Jersey, which probably is influenced when I went to college and studied conservation biology. My feeling that both brownfield and greenfield sort of environmental protection is very important. I've had a chance to live in really diverse and wonderful places. And my wife and I chose Olympia as our home in Thurston County in 2013 when we came here and we were able to pursue marriage. We're domestic partners in Illinois, but had a chance to really raise a family here. I mentioned that I've been involved in policy and politics for some time. When I moved here in 2013, I moved here to serve as nonpartisan counsel in the state legislature. I staffed committees that do technology, consumer privacy, telecommunications, economic development, and energy policy, and also government and elections. So things like the Voting Rights Act and the state's answer on the Voting Rights Act, ethics, open public meeting law, and Public Records Act, transparency laws that the voters have enacted in order to ensure that the government is serving the public. So those were my portfolios. But in 2016, I left nonpartisan staff soon after the presidential elections. So just when Olympia Indivisible was forming, and not necessarily in a partisan way, but in response to changes that made it feel like democracy was under threat, I was no longer comfortable serving as nonpartisan counsel. We can talk more about that and why that role didn't feel right for me anymore in the legislature. And I took a job at the State Department of Commerce as an energy policy specialist. I had gotten some expertise staffing those bills in the legislature, and it was my chance to work on what I do think is the fundamental crisis of all of our time, which is climate change. From that first role at Commerce, opportunities quickly opened to me. I stepped up to become our legislative director, running state agency campaigns, not only on clean energy, but for housing policy to extend the rights for unaccompanied youth and their access to housing and other bills on behalf of the agency. And over my 4 years in the sort of legislative role, I had a chance under Lisa Brown, who was the agency director, to take on a bigger and bigger portfolio, basically becoming the policy director and having a small team that I think is one of the best in state government, where I was able to work with a tribal director who reported to me, a federal policy advisor, a couple policy senior advisors, and the legislative coordinator to make sure we were connected across state government. Commerce is an agency that has a funny name, and commerce does make you think of economic development, which is linked to the port. But commerce also does land use, comprehensive land use planning, and the Growth Management Act. They have the State Energy Office. They do, they fund local government infrastructure and sometimes ports, but also they're at the front lines right now of addressing homelessness and housing, a major crisis here in our community. So I had a great opportunity at Commerce in that role to build relationships across all of the state agencies and across many associations, but often didn't actually touch the work on the ground. I was connecting at a sort of really heady policy level, helping formulate our budget priorities, helping advise the director about risks and opportunities. And during the COVID pandemic, I think I had a very rewarding opportunity to help pivot quickly to get money out to communities and sort of step in. I had a chance to help draft the eviction moratorium that helped keep people in their homes when social interventions were stopping people from being able to go work in restaurants. And so you'll hear in this background, it's a very generalist background. I'm trained as a lawyer. I have certain remarkable abilities to quickly gather information about an issue, but it's a spread out across, it's an inch deep and a mile wide background. I think that's a great background to have, but as I now step away from commerce and step into running for a local government office, I'm pretty interested in digging a little deeper and at least cultivating enough soil so that I'm helping grow plants and trees that even if I'm not the one planting them, I'm kind of familiar. I remember when that got put in at that corner. I remember when Sharon was a leader in helping advocate for that. Like the beauty of Olympia is we have a core of very engaged local leaders who are doing really vibrant and special things. And so for me, it's a great privilege right now to transition from state to local politics and policy. At Commerce, one of the reasons that the port seemed really interesting to me is we are at this really special moment after underinvestment in infrastructure. There is a moment with the federal infrastructure funding, even with the State Climate Commitment Act revenues, where there's money and there are opportunities for new partnerships, for strategic investments that help us pivot to a clean technology future, that help us build workforce to build a different kind of economy. We stood up a broadband office, and there's $1 billion coming to our state very soon to help connect our farms and ranches to broadband. We can recruit living wage jobs here in our community. We are ripely positioned right between Seattle and Portland. And in some ways, Thurston County, with its state government personnel, which I've long been, it's Evergreen College. It's I was just for Juneteenth, I was in Lacey up at the giant athletic center. I can't remember what it's called on Steilacoom. Seeing many more of military community and diverse communities farther outside from Olympia. We have a lot in Thurston County, and I don't think I think we're punching below our weight. I think there's just some connection of all of these pieces that hasn't kind of fully created what we can be here. I would like to bring my background, including what was pretty arduous work at a state agency, my understanding of how you slowly build coalitions and build partnerships, to an entity like the port that has so much opportunity and so much assets and clearly has some cultural problems right now, but they're problems we can transcend. And so for me also, there's a very special opportunity right now because under the current port leadership, that I'm really grateful, they supported this move towards 5 districts from 3 districts. And we have a chance then the incumbent port commissioners, as well as the new ones coming in, we have a chance to build a more collaborative, constructive and open framework for how we make decisions. We have a chance to partner with each other in new ways and with the director in different ways. And so it just seems a really good time for building something new. I'm not an engineer, but in some ways my role has been more like that, sort of threading things together on the small level, and to step into a role where I'm also articulating a vision, but bringing what I know about how to piece things together on a more granular or technical level is pretty exciting for me. I think you told me 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm probably around the 5-minute mark. Let me just scan and see if there's a few pieces about my background I didn't flag through my story about since I came to Olympia and Commerce, is that early in my career, I did in New Jersey begin my career working in public interest advocacy, working on brownfields issues as an environmental advocate. I ran summer canvases with the New Jersey Public Interest Research Group, and it kind of cut my teeth. I ran a successful campaign to win gubernatorial endorsement so that New Jersey adopted the Clean Car Law. We call that, you might call it the California low emission vehicles, or now we think of the zero emission vehicles everywhere. So that I think that early campaign work really showed me that communicating directly with people, advocacy, lobbying makes a difference. We had a little Toyota Prius that we drove around, but we could show legislators that it was not something outside of what they conceived of as a car. It was not something they had to be afraid of supporting because it was like a Jetson-like tiny mobile. They could even fit golf clubs in the trunk if they wanted to. And that might sound, I'm not being snide, I'm being serious, that it showed that there are steps you can take that are not radical and make a difference. And there are barriers to that in people's own understanding of what's possible. So that was my sort of kind of beginning. I've worked in, I've trained volunteer educators for a marine science center in Santa Barbara. I moved on to law school. I've worked on certain political campaigns at certain moments in my life, but I do have a nonpartisan brand, I guess, because of my time serving on nonpartisan staff. Even at Commerce, I made a real point of reaching across both parties and both leaders, the one that had power and the ones that were ranking and had messages. So I do like that I'm starting my political career in a race that is theoretically nonpartisan. I do expect that most of my support will come from both Democratic leaders who are lining up to endorse my campaign, environmental organizations, and unions. But that's a brief history, and I have lots more we can uncover together. Thanks for that.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I just to talk on your background, you are a graduate, I believe, from Harvard University, and you attended law school at University of Washington. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So, well, let's move on to some more some of the issues that at the port. So first question for you is, in your questionnaire response, you refer to, and this is a quote, good government advocates who support the triple bottom line. And I wasn't real clear what that meant. So could you explain that to me?
Oh, I guess it's the idea that you can have, in economic development, there's like the bottom line of whether you're making a profit, but there can also be sort of a bottom line about your social impact and your environmental impact. And that a resilient community with a resilient economy doesn't sort of say, oh, my ledger is not considering the social and environmental impacts of the decisions I'm making.
Oh, that explains it. So also, excuse me, in your questionnaire response, you said you support government that tries to achieve, quote, the greatest good for the greatest number. Do you think that this is the case currently at the Port of Olympia, or does the port cater to a few special interests at the expense of the greater community?
I want to work productively and in partnership and in friendship with whoever the 4 other port commissioners will be. People make decisions based on their own experience and what they know and their closest, who they know. So when you ask that, is the yacht club, for example, an amenity that is broadly experienced by all of the community, or is it a smaller group of people who enjoy the yacht club of people? But I understand why a leader who's connected and has grown up through the yacht club really, might see the yacht club as kind of a really important part of what the port is. When I come into office, I'm coming in with a perspective that is much broader. So part of my role is to help people who may have come from different backgrounds or based on a specific piece of Olympia or of Thurston County that they valued, and connect across to what I consider broader public interest values.
Okay, so I have a question that's kind of related to this, this previous question. So let's discuss the terminal operations at the port. So the biggest losing operational port business unit is the shipping terminal. It has been losing around $1 million annually for years. Some say that the loss is actually understated. You stated in your questionnaire response about this that the port has the rare privilege of subsidizing losing business operations if they bring significant community value to Thurston County. That's from your response. It seems to me that most of the benefits of the marine terminal were down to Weyerhaeuser as opposed to the public. I'm sure there are some benefits to the public, but it comes with significant costs, such as water and air pollution, let alone the enormous costs it'll take to sustain the shipping lanes in the future after removal of the Fifth Street Dam. What are your views on this subject, and what do you think of the current 100 and could be $150 million plan that the port is pursuing to clean up Butt Inlet to sustain the shipping lanes?
Those are a couple questions. I'm going to go in reverse order because the plan to clean up Butt Inlet, period, is the responsibility of the port because of historic action that has led to contamination. Now, I've had a chance to read, because of people who have more expertise than I do, that there's a difference possibly between a cleanup plan for the purpose of cleanup and a dredging plan for the purpose of deepening the shipping lanes. And you kind of combine those two, John, so I'm just separating them out in my answer. Stepping back then to your first question, I have many acquaintances and friends here close to downtown Olympia. They are the ones who've talked to me the most as I'm starting my run for office. Many share the feeling that, first of all, they don't necessarily know how much the subsidy is from taxpayers for the marine cargo terminal, but they have a feeling that, gosh, why are those logs taking up so much of our valuable waterfront? That feeling is shared by people who come from a more environmental perspective, but also from downtown business leaders who own businesses, some of whom have written me letters saying, why don't we build housing out there? This issue is a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to step back and then I'll step forward again. What I'm learning a lot as I am a candidate, I think that if our tax revenues are supporting Weyerhaeuser, they should be supporting community values that we know that are ascertainable and that we're achieving. We know that there are some high-paying jobs at that port, at the marine terminal. There's a small number of high-paying jobs, and those people must really care about their jobs, right? I need to go talk to the longshoremen. So when you say, how do you feel about there being a marine terminal? Well, historically, that's what ports were built to do. Ports were created so that farmers and other people who were harvesting from the land could get their products to market. But it was so that it wasn't so that very, very large multinational companies wouldn't have to worry about, private control of a dock. It was so that people in a populist moment would be able to also access these facilities. I think there's a lot of questions about why the port would support the continued operation of the marine terminal, specifically by subsidizing Weyerhaeuser. Okay. There's a second question about the port's viability as a deep harbor port, period, as we move forward. When I answered this question in your questionnaire, I tried to reverse your question to ask first, what is our view for what does the public want from this asset, this incredible asset right here connected to downtown? Some of those questions have been answered. The port did a major Vision 2050 document with serious community engagement. And what the people said they wanted was more connection for recreational opportunities, more connection to nature. Another way that this has been answered is by the legislature, who controls the Capitol campus and has decided that they've directed the Department of Enterprise Services that they want the Deschutes estuary to be restored. So that dam, is that Bud Bay Inlet, I guess is how you talk about, the dam would be coming out. When you start adding these things together, I need to understand the viability even of a deep harbor in this spot. I am never for corporate subsidies that benefit the few specifically and that aren't in broad benefit. I am for just transition for workers who are being displaced when a public entity makes a choice or changes direction, even when we're making a choice on behalf of the greater community, the greater good, and climate change. I think we have some really good examples down in Centralia when a coal plant was closed. There were some agreements that were made to kind of help the community survive that change. Here, I think this is a much smaller thing to do. There's many fewer people directly dependent on those specific jobs that Weyerhaeuser has. And so I do think this is a major question. And it's something that 3 out of 5 commissioners can make a determination on. We've got about 10-year runway for that Deschutes estuary restoration. So it's a good time to kind of be getting to clarity so that if people are dependent on the current operations and the way they are, the individual human beings, the families in our community, have sort of a runway to start to visualize what their life looks like. And so this is not a question we can avoid. I want to avoid it because I don't want to have to wade in right this second before I've deeply engaged through my candidacy and serving as a commissioner to see all the information. But I know we can't avoid this question. We're going to have to grapple with this. We need to make decisions now so that we can have a 10-year runway, 15-year runway. And one of the things we have to do is figure out if we're subsidizing things with property tax dollars, making sure they're going to the right places. That said, one of the things I'm learning that I want to come back to that makes this complicated, if my wife is the kind of person who's always imagining what happens if she's in Shelton for a meeting with a client when the big Cascadia earthquake happens. I don't know if any of you are like that. I'm not like that. I would go crazy if I were thinking these things through. Some of the economic development leaders that I've been talking to who've been engaged, worked at the port in the past, maybe are still engaged at the city, have said, Jasmine, don't underestimate the resiliency value of having some water access that's maintainable from the port in the event of a big disruption, whether it's that earthquake or something else. If I-5 goes down, the community still needs to access things. So I don't mean to say, oh, everything's super complicated, but I'm learning layer after layer that's making it hard for me to say some of the things that my supporters brought me in with, like the businessman who said, we should be building housing out there. Well, it's Phil. I don't know that housing belongs out on the peninsula. The peninsula does. We do need public access. It can have more amenities. What those amenities are, I'm a month into my campaign and I'm learning more and more about it. So if I seemed not to answer something directly as I kind of ticked around a circle, please ask me a follow-up question.
Well, yeah, I think it is a complicated issue, that's for sure. But I think that, well, it's not my place to give my opinion here at this time. But anyway, I think your answer is very thoughtful and considered, and I appreciate that. My next question: many port local port activists have been frustrated by the lack of transparency from the staff at the port. Major port actions can be brought to the commissioners without any time for the public to weigh in. The Swire deal is an example of this. The public had 2 weeks, or actually less, because the Thanksgiving holiday was in there, from the time the proposal was revealed to the public to when it was formally approved by the commission. What do you think can be proved to improve that situation? And will you commit to encouraging staff to be more forthcoming and giving the public more time, especially on, big projects like this that are being considered by the commission?
Yes, John, I think that one of the key things here is the commitment of a very long-term lease, and with very long-term assets from the community that are being devoted to the lease, the water rights, that was a Tumwater, I guess, jurisdictional call, but it's still something that the port as a government entity might be working with constituents to understand. I think when you have a business deal that's going to last for generations, we have to figure out how to give people adequate public process to understand it. I think also one thing I don't fully understand yet and need to look into is, what are the principles we've already put in place for staff and the commission in terms of due diligence and transparency behind these sorts of decisions up front? In other words, if the staff is proposing a 75-year lease for something, what are the things that they should be already bringing to the commission early in the process of that consideration? Or what are the principles that should guide such decisions to begin with? I think by having clear principles in place, it can help, because one of the challenges I've been told by some who have been involved in politics as political elected leaders longer than I have, that the port sometimes, it seems here in Olympia, feels like kryptonite, like they can't do anything right. And I'm sure it feels that way to the commissioners. One of the challenges I see for a port is that they are in a business of making some business deals, and they have a strange statutory existence that is both as a government and as a proprietary sort of business owner. I think then there has to be clarity for the staff at a port commission of the differences between how they are expected to conduct business than how perhaps the private sector does business. And I'm not clear that those sorts of guidelines, of course, there's guidelines about certain key strategic documents that have to have public hearing, right? I did that research. I've put it in my answers on the questionnaire. WPPA has some good support there. But why? What are the principles behind those documents? How are decisions linked to those documents? And if they're not linked, why are we doing things that are not linked to the key strategic documents that you've already negotiated with public input? These are pieces of kind of good government hygiene that I think maybe the dots haven't been fully connected. And I think in part, they haven't been fully connected because I've just been in state government. We're at a time of very rapid transformation in our expectations around transparency and visibility. It's been something I've been engaged with from the government side. And now in this hybrid environment and the way things happen both in meetings and on Zoom, I think that there are a lot of entities that haven't caught up. I'm not apologizing for past practice, but I'm saying that there are actual managerial things that I think can be done that will help kind of restore the trust of public people, public citizens, public individuals, regardless of their immigration status, with the actions being taken by the port as a government entity.
Thank you. So you have some great ideas about how to promote environmentally sustainable economic growth in Thurston County. Would you like to discuss some of these ideas?
Well, sure, because I'm running from Olympia District 1, which is the heart of, it's downtown, near East Side, down to Briggs, kind of over to Slater Kinney. But the general election, this position doesn't just represent my district, it's countywide. And I really do think that here in Thurston County, that our sort of agricultural local food system is really thriving and can do more. I think it's important from a climate perspective that we keep food sources local. I think it's important from sort of a community vitality perspective, because it creates the sort of connection to the land and opportunities for jobs that I think people truly find rewarding. And I think it's also important from a resiliency perspective beyond climate, that it, in time of disrupted supply chains and strange things, we've got our own gardens nearby. So rural agriculture, I think, is actually a shining spot of work that the port has already been partnering with the Thurston EDC and WSU Extension Ag. I've been working to learn more about it, to put together sort of a rural food hub, to make some facilities available for cold storage. And I would like to see how we could build on what has already been successful, thanks to the current leaders, and expand on that. And I have friends who run different farms. A family, one of my kids is at Waldorf, and a family who lives in Yelm was sharing with me that there are partnerships for shellfish growing that possibly have other ports, smaller ports in the area participating. I have a lot to learn about how our port has decided, what it's supporting and not supporting, but I do love local food. And then the value added food economy that can grow from that, with sort of craft food creation and the maker economy, I think is really important to us. Broadband, I think, is important to all small businesses, and including farms out there. And I think that right now, the main population centers in Olympia are already, in Thurston County, are already served, and there are still unserved places, and they're not getting a lot of attention. I had a chance to meet with Commissioner Isle, and I understand that there are plans for the Nisqually tribe to connect down to the south, I think with Chehalis. And so he shared that early on he was looking for opportunities for the port to partner in that work. And I think there's more opportunity for us. And there's what I called in my questionnaire patient capital. To the extent we do have a tax levy, and the port has, whether it's $40 or $100, depending on how much assessed value someone owns in the county, that the port is sort of charging on a biannual, twice a year through your property tax bill. That money can be used. We can be more patient in the sort of investments we make. We don't have to turn a profit within a year. If we were to invest in a broadband project, it's okay if it takes 10 years to pay back, as it's helping other people. I think that's an incredibly important role for government right now. And then the third piece, I guess, sometimes we have third pieces. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, well, those are some good pieces.
Oh, it's electrification. So I have spent time as an energy advocate. I am aware of what kind of resources we have available. The very big ports, they already have direct provisos in our state budget where they're working to electrify their operations, and they're getting the state to help subsidize that. We have a smaller port operations, but there's no reason we can't start looking at our charging infrastructure and at opportunities to kind of have zero emission energy. And especially with the amount of land that's owned by the port, maybe there's more opportunities for clean energy facility development. So I think I don't want to add too much that's not already within Vision 2050, because I do think the people have spoken and they've laid out some pretty good plans for the port. But to the extent we haven't figured out sort of how to get to electric infrastructure in the next 10 years, that's the kind of work that we really ought to be figuring out right away.
Absolutely. So this will be the last formal question, and then I'll let you just give your closing thoughts. So another response that you gave that I thought was interesting is you said that there is a, quote, governance problem at the port. Can you explain this to us? And what would your approach be on how to deal with that?
So Of course, I see the articles in Thurston Jolt or in the Olympian about issues with the workforce at the port. And I'm aware, because of activists who I've been building trust and understanding with, of some of the issues we have with how decisions have been made. What I'm not aware of until I get there is what this problem is. Is it a disconnect between commissioners and the executive director? Is it a disconnect between an executive director and staff? Is it commissioners not even having the right information? So that's why they're giving kind of poor guidance. I just want to say I don't know what the problem is for sure, but I know there's a big one when there's a problem with workforce and when decision after decision being made are decisions that really feel upsetting to the broader community. What was the second part of your question, John, about how we would fix it? You're on mute.
It was, how you would approach fixing it, but I think you kind of addressed that.
Well, I would say one of the things I put in my answer, I think there is a delegation of authority memo that is part of what the commission navigates with their executive director. And it sets out the principles for what decisions are the executive directors to make. And when they make those decisions without consultation, because any executive director does some work without always checking up, kind of what are the expectations and the performance expectations. So I think one thing that's really clear to me, it's not specific to Olympia. It comes from my research and conversations with others who've been at other ports as they share with me that, yes, they've seen there's challenges here, is that renegotiating that delegation of authority so that it's setting out clear principles and expectations for both the commissioners and the executive director is very important, because there has to be trust. The commissioners have to be able to trust each other, and they have to be able to trust their director. And so one of the main things any candidate has to be able to do is figure out how to start building trust when they take office.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be a big job for the new commissioners when they come in next year, because currently there's not a whole lot of trust from what I've observed. So
unless the current commissioners, it's June, there's 6 months. So yes, it'll be a continued job no matter what.
Hopefully
Why do I
some
hope
progress.
that the current commissioners start that work and start setting the ship straight, and that we get to work in and kind of into something that's already a moving, something where there's progress.
Yeah. So in the last few minutes that you have, can you, anything you'd like to tell us about, anything else that you'd like to tell us with regard to the port and your campaign? And how is your campaign doing in terms of organization, fundraising, all of that stuff? So
thank you, John. The most important thing I have to tell you is that my campaign kickoff is on Wednesday, 5 to 7 p.m., Lions Park. That's solstice. People can roll over right after work if you're working in the day, or just come on over, bring a picnic. I'm going to have Beth Dolio and Sam Hunt, who I've worked with over the years, will speak. But it's really an important moment for my campaign as I start to mobilize and sign up people as volunteers who are going to help me. I don't have a lot of name recognition. You'll see my signs basically say Jasmine, and Vasavada is written small because it's going to be hard for other people to pronounce as well. But I need to get out there so that people know there's a woman named Jasmine running for port. And so that kickoff is a really important moment in my campaign. I'm trying to get 100 people out there to Lions Park to get that going. Fundraising has gotten off the ground. I'm really grateful for my supporters so far. I don't expect that I'm going to be fundraising for the most part in $500 increments from private companies, right? I'm going to need a lot of small donors to support my work. It's weird too, right? Asking people to contribute. I mean, the port plays an important role, and these jobs are so small and off the radar. I'll be fundraising many times what the actual port commissioner's salary is. I'm estimating for a successful campaign. And it kind of tells you why it's hard why there might be inequities in whoever even decides they can run for office, right? I mean, I feel very fortunate that I have the support of my wife, who's a public defender, and that we can get by right now. So fundraising is going well. I have about $3,000 I reported in my first PDC. I think that I will be starting to get some endorsements, and with that, some support will be coming in. And then I hope you'll help me spread the word that we can do something different here at the Port of Olympia, and we have a chance to shake it up, but in a really good way for our community and our values.
No, thank you so much. You've been,
John, can we
yes.
just mention, we just did put your website into the chat box so people can get to know you a little bit better. So
Yeah.
anyone who wants to link to it, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and the kickoff information, I'm sure will be on the website for everybody, so. Yeah.
And seeing who's running your common tech, I have no excuse anymore for not being able to figure out my own things. I gotta get there. I can do it too. So I'm learning how to use social media, which for many years after having served on tech privacy issues, I really shut down Facebook. I'm trying to get out there more and get the word out. So if anyone, by the way, wants to help me just in sort of social media outreach, that's an area where I could probably use some help in amplifying my message. And thank you to all of you, some of you indirectly, some of you more directly, who are helping me learn these issues. As I read and study, there's a nice record out there because of community leaders who've been out there really monitoring and trying to bring transparency to what's happening at the port.
Again, well, thank you very much, and thank you for stepping up to running for office and putting yourself out there to serve the community. We really appreciate all the candidates who are doing this. So, but I think it's time we need to move on. So,
all right, and I'm glad to see Maggie Sanders because now I can tell she is Hishka. When I saw Maggie Sanders register to run, I then looked on social media and couldn't tell which Maggie Sanders it was, and now I know. So nice to thank you, and Wayne, Maggie, good luck today, and thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, so let me introduce Dennis Stambach, excuse me, who will be our next moderator here for Wayne Fournier. If I pronounce that, probably mess that one up. But anyway, so go ahead, Dennis, and take over.
Great, thank you, John. So first of all, Wayne, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. And quick early question, is your name pronounced Fournier, or do you pronounce the R on the end of it?
For me, I leave it open. It's like a Rorschach test.
Okay. And Wayne is a candidate for Thurston County Commissioner in District 4. And Wayne, could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to wanting to run for this office?
Certainly. So I am born and raised in Tenino, Washington. I was born here in 1980, and I went through school here. My family has a long history here, dating back to like the late 1800s. I love my community. It means a lot to me, and I love serving it. One of my great grandfathers was on the city charter in 1905. My grandfather was the police chief in the 70s. My dad was a fire chief through the 80s and 90s. And then I got into public service when I turned 18, joined the volunteer fire department, and at the same time entered into college and just kind of fell in love with education and working in government, and also love the fire service. I've been a career firefighter for 20 years. I've been a firefighter for 25 years, and kind of all the the meanwhile, I've kind of run a secondary career track where I started out in college working in student government. And then I moved on to doing other like leadership roles in the community, in my community. And I was first elected to office in 2012 as a city council member. And then in 2015, I was elected to mayor, and I've been mayor for the city of Tenino since then. And I've really enjoyed it. And I could do it, I could continue doing it for a long time and be very happy with it. But also, you know, while I've been mayor of Tenino and kind of a leader in South Thurston County, there's, you know, from the start, definitely been a disconnect from South Thurston County and kind of the more urban centers. And, you know, that leads to issues. You know, there's a somewhat of a feeling of disenfranchisement. And then there's, you know, also the real truth, and a lot of decisions are made without, you know, kind of, you know, maybe some rural South Thurston County flair or flavor to some of the decisions. So that further leads us to feel disenfranchised. And so we've been talking about that for a long time. And, you know, I've been building bridges. And, you know, last year, I was an advocate for rechartering, and I've been all for moving to 5 commissioners since, you know, the discussion came up in my time. And then last year it was voted in to move to 5 commissioners. And then subsequently in that year passed, there was a lot of discussion about what the district map would look like. I was a strong advocate for the one that we have now. I love the fact that it breaks up and creates a Southwest Thurston County district. And I feel like there's some like communities down there, and it's a good opportunity for kind of, you know, building trust with county government that has been frayed. The whole HCP discussion was kind of a mess down here. There's a lot of it was kind of weaponized in a lot of ways to create some dissension. And, you know, I feel that, you know, I'm called to this new seat, and I am uniquely qualified to be able to, you know, work countywide. And it's important that the first, but right now, that the first person that takes this seat is somebody that is a collaborator, that's somebody that has relationships countywide and is able to work with our county commissioners. My opponent is, you know, very much against the majority of the seated commissioners, is very anti-county government, is very anti-government in general, and it's just not it's not healthy for the county to have that attitude. So, you know, I feel like I've done the work, and I've built the relationships to be able to be successful to set up, you know, kind of a first office and build the, you know, the legacy that will be District 4.
Okay, thank you for that. So as far as I can tell, you've been Tenino mayor for six plus years. Can you tell us a little bit about how Tenino has changed and things that you feel you've accomplished as mayor?
Yeah. So, you know, when I took office in 2012, Tenino was pretty economically depressed. Our commercial, our commercial sector was basically, it was plywood on windows. I mean, there was really no, there was no commercial activity. And, you know, I started out trying to figure out how to get things going, how to, you know, get the gears moving again. And a lot of my, you know, exploration into government started out just Googling, what does economic development mean? How do I make these connections? And there, you know, it wasn't just me. There was a lot of other very interested people. The South Thurston Economic Development Initiative kind of kicked off right as I came into office, and I very quickly made relationships with the Economic Development Council. I've served on the EDC for quite a while now, and just bringing business in. You know, initially it started out very, rudimentary. I would recruit businesses to come into town, like a college recruiter would look for athletes. and I would lure them in by saying, I will help you renovate your business. I will go in and paint your walls. And I did those kinds of things when I wasn't working, when I wasn't marrying, but that was what needed to be done. And, just a lot of it was, I would get out there and I would believe in, the future of our community. And I would, tell the story of, Tenino's history, why it's important, where we could go. And, I believe that there was a lot of, I saw something extraordinary in what a lot of people had kind of taken for granted and seen as ordinary. I went away to college and I came back to Tenino with like a fresh perspective after backpacking, all over Europe. And I came back here and I was like, this is a neat place. Why don't we take better care of it? Why don't we have more pride in our community? And, there should be great things here. Why isn't there a little, wine shop on the corner where, people can go visit? And then, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And I got fairly adept at finding grants and finding money to fund projects. And, just today we had a ribbon cutting on I think we've got about $2 million into a park and playground renovation that we did a ribbon cutting on today. That was, we've got a world-class park, and there were hundreds of kids from around South Thurston County and families that were down there playing today. And I just kind of sit in there and I'm at the finish line on the mayor tenure, and I'm listening to all these families talk about how great this is and how much, this was never like this when I was a kid in Tenino. They built this big park and now the kids can play, and it's fun. I've really, really enjoyed the past decade in government. And, we've, right now, our kind of my biggest flagship project is the agricultural economic development, I'm sorry, I'm tripping on my words, the agricultural industrial park. And we've got about $8 million in funding and we're going vertical on buildings right now where we will house the EDC's Center for Business and Innovation. We'll have storage and processing facilities for regional agricultural producers. And just like Jasmine was talking about before me, the regional food system is very important for a lot of reasons. And, a place like Tenino, Rochester, Independence Valley, we still have farmland that's very important. But if we don't have the infrastructure that can support the small farms, they're just going to turn to crack houses as well. And so, putting in, creating the ability for somebody to process meat or even wool, just like these little like niche, needs that we found out about that just don't exist in the chain of goods, where we create them where you can just processing wool so you can shear sheep and turn it into a pillow or a mattress. There's little things where you have to ship your wool down to Texas to have it properly processed and then ship back here so you can get it to market. The same with beef production. If you're a cattle rancher and you want to create a steak that can be sold in a restaurant locally or a supermarket, you have to send it down to Eastern Oregon for it to be processed. And that, there's little steps that we've lost because, all these, these economic processes have become so centralized, and, we've just lost the ability to do things locally. And so I'm excited about what we're creating at the Ag Industrial Park to where we can kind of, bring back some of that production ability to our local producers.
Great, thank you. You just ran over one of my questions, but that's great. I'd like to touch on that agriculture park anyway. So that was excellent.
I can talk more about it. I get excited about this stuff.
Okay, well, if we have time, maybe we'll go back to it. In your questionnaire, you mentioned sustainable growth as the most pressing issue in the county. Okay, so that's number one. Are there others, other important issues, top issues for you in the county government?
Just, like the whole sustainable concept to me is all about balance, and it's balancing, economic needs, environmental needs, human needs. and in not letting those things, tip out of balance. There's a lot of pressure in the county for industrial development, and that's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And how do you control that? How do you manage that? That's something we need to start talking about. If you drive down I-5, and all you guys are aware of this, or all you folks are aware of this, you get off in any of these little exits that have been nothing. Now you're seeing a giant Costco warehouse. You're seeing, the Amazon warehouses. If we don't come up with a way to, manage that, centralize that, plan for that, those are going to quickly take over a lot of just open space right now. So that, that's part of, a balanced approach to development that I see. But, how do we manage the, the commercial and industrial side of things where, you have to allow for jobs. You can't, there's no stand there. It's very difficult to stand in the way of those things. The airport, I think we've successfully kind of fended that off for now, but to me, that was a very scary proposal where, we've got, Thurston County is always going to be changing. It's always going to be growing. So you have to, kind of understand where that's going. But if you miss that piece of the puzzle, and all of a sudden there's just warehouses up and down I-5, I think that that could be detrimental. The growth in Tenino, we were 10 years ago, my predecessors put in a larger wastewater treatment plant in anticipation of a few thousand houses going in, and thankfully, it wasn't a good thing that we had the housing crisis and the recession and some of the endangered species, things stopping development. For a lot of people, that wasn't a good thing. But in some ways, I am very thankful that our prairie was, seemingly preserved by, powers outside of all of our decisions. And, the skids were put on, the massive, 1,000 home development that was planned out here. And now we've got a working ranch where, we've got an equestrian center. We've got the agricultural and industrial park going in. And those are things that to me are a more, kind of sustainable approach to development, where you got to make plans and allow for things to happen, but you've got to do it in a way where we're not going to, shoot ourselves in the foot.
Okay, thank you. One of the things you mentioned in the answer to your questionnaire was a minimum tax on vacant structures as a possible revenue source. Can you explain a little bit more about how that would work and what's the thinking behind it?
The thinking is, we are in a housing crisis, and it's, you've got to use all when you're a crisis, when you're in an emergency, you need to use all available resources. And if there are vacant structures, vacant houses, and, people are sitting on those for various reasons, they're not helping us. They're not getting us through, the crisis. And we all have a responsibility to roll up our sleeves. And the thought is that, there should be some type of, duty paid to help, help solve the situation. There's some communities that are looking into things like that. In Grays Harbor, the city of Aberdeen, I just learned is looking at a fine system. And I've been talking to different legal, minds about the difference between taxes, fees, fines. How could you create something like that? And, structures are like, vital organs in the body in a community. And if they're not being used, the community just starts dying. If you've got something sitting there, it should be put into place.
All right, thank you. So you mentioned increased tourism would be a good way to raise money and maybe not have to raise taxes on Thurston County residents, because you get some tax money coming in from outside. What sort of tourism opportunities do you see? What is that tourism going to look like in Thurston County?
The Bountiful Byway is a great example of an effort that's been underway for some time, but it needs fertilizer and it needs help and it needs support. Finding unique things that would make people come here. We live in a beautiful place, and the outdoor spaces we have, the waterways that we have, just the natural environment that we have is world class. And finding ways to make those accessible to more people, finding ways to market and brand those, just brand marketing and selling the vision of a place. Things like, and I work pretty closely with the VCB, the Visitor Convention Bureau, and we're working on ideas like coming up with an Olympia film tour. There's a lot of really cool movies over the years that have been made in this region, highlighting those. These are the things that I travel for. A brewery tour. We've got a lot of good craft breweries, and they exist fairly independently. Working with organizations like the VCB to bring them together to come up with passport systems. If you travel to the McMinimans properties, you have a passport. And everyone you go to, you get a stamp. And at the end of the year, if you've been to all the McMinimans properties, you get a prize. So just fun things like that bring people into the area, and just leveraging the assets that we have. In my community, I have really put a lot of effort into our park system and outdoor play and outdoor space. And I see our parks and our outdoor spaces as like our community living rooms. The county has not done a very good job maintaining its parks and, kind of updating its parks over the last years. And I want to say about 2006, 2007, they just decimated the park staff, and they never really restored any of that funding or any of that staff to where we could have outdoor programs and, kind of bring the parks up to better standards and having new play structures, improved trails. Our trail system, the bike trails, I'm probably one of the biggest advocates for building out the bike trail system, and making sure that that's paid attention to, providing influence to the various groups that Transportation Improvement Board, making sure that they're talking about the trail system. This year, the county has made a lot of investments into our trail system, and I want to see that continue. I'd like to see that people be able to take a bicycle all the way from the northern part of Lacey down to Raymond, and hit the Willapa Hills Trail, and people will travel for that kind of thing. And then it also makes the outdoors more accessible. In our park in Tenino, we have a 50-acre park in a city that's probably 55 acres, and that's pretty cool. And we recently added some paved trails to the backside of it, and so now I'm seeing a lot more people that have mobility difficulties get out and explore more parts of the trail, and that's really great. That's excellent. I think making sure that efforts like those are done. So, there was a gentleman the other day that I met way in the back of our park system that had a walker and an oxygen tank, and he was out in I was like, hey, how are you doing? What's your story? And he told me that he was on a lung transplant list, and he was out and he started walking our new trails to keep himself healthy while he waits for that lung transplant. And prior to the trail construction, he wouldn't have had the ability to access those different parts of the park. And so, when you improve the quality of life, when you create the outdoor opportunities, you build community, you build pride, and you have, clean outdoor spaces, people will travel to them.
Okay, thanks. So you're running for commissioner in District 4. Are there particular issues unique to District 4 or that impact District 4 that are of interest to you?
that are interesting to me. And of course, this is my home, and this is my community. I consider all of my neighbors, like family, and so taking care of my community is of interest to me. I think I have a duty to perform those things. The things that we're working on down here that I'm passionate about is the rural economy, the ag economy, ensuring that kind of the lifestyle that we're accustomed to is maintained. We're very blessed to be able to drive or step outside our front doors and see nature and be a part of nature. And I get to look out my back window, and I've seen beaver swimming down the creek, and that needs to be maintained. There needs to be places where you can go and do that. The other issue, and I alluded to it earlier, is building bridges and building trust. And the county government is it's the trust is frayed. The public trust is gone, and without that, you can't government can't function. So rebuilding that, working on that, setting expectations within the various communities down here, and giving people a voice.
Okay. Thanks. You have a background, obviously, in public safety, and you mentioned that as a point of interest or of emphasis. Could you talk a little bit about what kinds of things the county could be doing better, or how they can improve public safety?
Sure. Public safety is not just police. There's public safety is safe roads, clean drinking water, clean air. There's a much broader thing. So as a first responder, I want to be careful not to get painted in the corner of me thinking public safety is just fire engines and police cars, even though I love fire engines and police cars. So those things are important. The county is talking about a public safety sales tax, and I'm an advocate for that. And that would put 0.02% in addition onto our current sales tax, and that revenue would be shared throughout all the communities. And it would also, a lot of it would go to the sheriff's department, which is understaffed. So our citizen to deputy ratio is not great. In the district that I live in, it's vast, and it's called the D David unit. We typically have one deputy down here covering a large amount of area, and that's not a good scenario. So working on that, increasing the numbers at the sheriff's department, and that would allow for some more stable funding to the various fire departments. That I'm an advocate for. Some of the it's been very difficult, especially in the Rochester area, to pass some of the levies that they've struggled with in the last couple of years. And so they've been looking at shutting down fire stations. They've been looking at laying off firefighters, and they are needed. They are stretched thin. So I'm an advocate for those things. And beyond that, public education is a big part of public safety, and that's easily missed. Those aren't when it's not flashing lights and it's talking about educating people to get them to change behaviors is important. Talking to people about the educating people on proper uses of emergency services is, I think, kind of missed. So things of that nature.
Okay, you alluded briefly to the homelessness issue in Thurston County, but could you talk to us a little bit about your approach to trying to I hate to say resolve that issue, but mitigate that issue?
Yeah, to help with. It is a tough one, and it's not one that I'm, in my home life, in my mayor life, I don't deal with it as much as my colleagues in Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, Yelm. But we of course talk about it in our monthly meetings and things like that. You know, I think as a county commissioner, it's going to be important that I listen very well to the people that do deal with that every day, and the people that do advocate and come up with the solutions. It's certainly not something I'm an expert. I'm not an expert in anything, but that's certainly something I'm not an expert in. As a first responder, I do have a lot of experience at that level. I work in the city of Aberdeen, which, you know, it is a big issue there. And, you know, for us, the improvements that we've made in our response and ability to work with, you know, people that are unhoused has been in the way of some of the crisis responders and some of the nonprofit organizations and folks that understand social work better than me. I'm just a knuckle dragging firefighter. For me, I need to better understand the social work side of things and what the resources are that are out there that can, you know, help somebody that is, you know, struggling, because people struggle for, you know, the myriad of reasons, but and so getting help for them is just as difficult, that, you know, whether it's substance use disorders or, you know, financial, you know, somebody's taking advantage of somebody financially, or it's a, you know, human trafficking thing. You know, no one person's going to be an expert in all those, you know, those resources and ways to help somebody. But it's important that first responders know that, you know, something needs to be done. You know, in years past, we would get there, you take somebody's blood pressure, you're like, well, you're fine. I'm gonna get on out of here, and you leave them in the situation that they're in. We as a community need to do a better job in finding that missing piece that can get them the help that they need. And, you know, if as a commissioner, I can advocate for, you know, better training for first responders or some type of awareness level of social work, you know, course for first responders, you know, I think that could, you know, help move the needle.
Okay. Similar question, but regarding climate change, obviously a huge issue everywhere. And what do you see as the priorities for the county in trying to reverse the effects of climate change, or at least slow them down?
Yeah. Again, you know, this is not my wheelhouse, but, you know, I do believe that it is an issue. You know, my understanding is that, you know, it is a reduction of carbon emissions is important. And to the best of my ability, that is something that we have made a priority during my administration in Tenino. And if you drive down here, you'll see an unusual amount of homes that have solar panels on them. We've gotten grants with PSE in creating a microgrid system with battery backups to allow for more regular use of solar power. Right now, we're going through the process of getting funding for installing EV charging stations. So, you know, I am not, you know, a climate expert or you know, any type of scientist whatsoever, but I do recognize the needs. I do, you know, appreciate the needs, and I'm on board with, you know, with finding solutions. So making sure that there's staff people that understand that that's important, making sure that you know, those decisions, the decisions that are made go through some type of, you know, lens where those are taken into, you know, those needs are taken into consideration is important.
Okay. So we're getting close to a close here. Are there things that I have not brought up that you would like to bring up, subjects you just want to get out there?
Just, you know, I of course think about this a lot, and I think about what this, you know, position means to kind of balancing out the county. And, you know, I feel that, you know, I have spent the last 10 years building the relationships that are required and developing the understanding of local government that is needed to be able to step into a seat and get to work. And, you know, I can be very hard charging, but I have learned over the years the importance of patience and the importance of doing things slow and methodically so that they're lasting. I've had the benefit of working in a very small local government to where, you know, if it was a ship on the water, it would be a speedboat, and you can make really quick changes and you can get things done very quickly. But I've also worked in large bureaucracies where it is like a very large ship, but once you start making those turns in that large ship, there's no turning it back. So, you know, I feel like I've got the, you know, the ability to work in a larger government and a larger bureaucracy, and I'm getting more excited about that. You know, like I think it's odd to get excited about bureaucracy, but I'm looking, you know, I'm really hoping to get the opportunity to step into, you know, this kind of larger seat and have a greater amount of influence, and, you know, bring, you know, the success that we've had in Tenino to the rest of, you know, not just South Thurston County, but the rest of Thurston County. And, you know, I think that I have the background to do that.
Outstanding. Thanks. So this is the point where I'm supposed to say that we're going to put your website info into the chat, but I noticed that you actually did that yourself earlier. So excellent.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to do it again, but also, can you just tell us about your campaign a little bit? Endorsements, fundraising, campaign structure, and events that you've been involved in.
Yeah, so I got started really early. I knew that I wanted to do this. I saw it coming. So shortly after the first of the year, I jumped in with both feet and started working on endorsements. If you were to go to my website, I have a very robust endorsement list, you know, from tops of government to, you know, the rest of the way. So there's, you know, almost every elected official in Thurston County, several state officials. I have the endorsement of Beth Dolio, Senator Vandeweghe, the county commissioners, well, Carolina and Ty have both endorsed me. I'm very, very excited about that. Every mayor. And so, you know, I've done the work there, started working on it early. I had a great campaign kickoff early on with, you know, well over 100 people from throughout the county. It was a really good time. And I'm working on it. I'm making phone calls every week. I sit down and make phone calls. I've got several interns that are maintaining my phone lists and my contact lists. Today I did 2 events. Like I'm working tirelessly, and I thrive on it. So I usually work my whole life. I've usually had 2 to 3 jobs. So I'm out there working. I'm looking forward to getting out to doors. We're cutting up the list to do that. I have a great campaign manager, Danielle Westbrook, has done several campaigns, and her and I work very well together. Jim Camber is my finance advisor, and he and I are sitting down doing fundraising weekly. And then, you know, I would love the support of, you know, anyone else out there. I'm not, you know, I'm open to all kinds of support and help. I would love the endorsement of everyone on this panel and everyone at Olympia Indivisible. My website's very accessible, and you know, I'm excited. I enjoy this. I'm a glutton for punishment. Fundraising's gone well.
Well,
I've raised more than anybody else in the county so far.
Okay. Outstanding. Well, Wayne, I want to thank you again. John, did we want to have a few closing remarks at this point?
Just thank Wayne and for coming and spending time with us. And, you know, we're looking forward to our completing our endorsement process, and we'll be back with you, back at
Awesome.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It was nice to meet you all. I'd love to meet you in person someday.
Great. Thanks for coming.
Okay, I guess
All
that's a
right. Appreciate it.
wrap.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.